Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, the official podcast of the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. This is episode 71, on purpose to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World this month. I'm your host, Todd McCartney, and sitting in with me for this recording, as always, Mr. JT Cougar. How you doing tonight, JT?
I'm good. How did you plan this out back in 2014 to be episode 71, October? That's crazy.
It is crazy, huh?
Episode I'd 71. Say that's the biggest surprise of this whole thing. So.
I think we realized about 6-7 episodes ago, we're like, oh, if we time this right, it could work. So here we are.
And then what episode's going to be more special, 71 or 100, if we make it to 100?
I hope we make it to 100. I want to be there for it, so that's what I'm looking forward to. And coming into us from the city that is always in season is Mr. Hal Bowers. How are you doing tonight, Hal?
Aloha. I'm doing fine. How are you?
Did you know that was a little nomenclature for your city?
I did not realize that we were the city that was always in season.
I've been doing a little research on the St. Pete area, so we've got a couple more stored away. So
I mean, that just goes to show you how awesome we are. We have like 25,000 nicknames, apparently.
Exactly. And it's always in season. You can go outside or inside anytime you want, whether you want to cool off or sweat. So
that's true.
So, all right. And also coming in from Philadelphia, Mr. Brian P. Malniels. How you doing tonight, Brian?
Greetings and salutations from the city of brotherly love, the only name we've had since the Union was formed.
Yeah, and we'll keep it at that. You're close enough to the city as we talked about.
Ben Franklin called us that. I think that's where the name comes from.
Speaking of Ben Franklin, I was actually going through some older footage this evening, and the Ben Franklin character in Liberty Square made an appearance on the film. So that's a rare little clip we're going to get to see.
That is a rare thing.
Yeah. We have a lot to talk about tonight, gentlemen. This is the 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World. We are going to do corrections and comments as well as a couple listener mails here because last month we went back to the Monster Sound Show, and my goodness, first of all, we recorded in stereo. We're not doing that tonight, so people don't adjust your stereos and trying to see if Hal's on the left or I'm on the right. That was quite a monster edit, if I do say so myself. And just like the show, I think I had close to 60 or 70 different sound clips and, special effects that we added in. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. Gentlemen, what did you think? Because I had an absolute blast putting it together, but I was exhausted. It was the longest edit I've ever done. So
thank you for your service, Todd.
Oh, you're welcome, Al.
Lots of sound drops. I love a good sound drop.
Exactly. We had Tom Cruise even come in, right? He's been mentioned multiple times, and how you did a great job. All of you did a great job on your sound effects machines too. So I gotta compliment you. So,
thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Very welcome. So with that, JT, we had a lot of questions come in about the Monster Sound Show and comments and things. So what did we get this month?
One of the big ones, and we got it from a few people, but I have one here from Scott. He says, just listen to this podcast. Always enjoy going back with you guys. The first time I actually checked out the sound stage was when they already switched over to the Drew Carey version. He remembers bees. Here's a quick question. Do you think the sound booth rooms they used at Disney MGM are the same ones they have at the Animal Kingdom? I've done those a few times. They seem to be exactly what you described on the podcast. Maybe they repurposed them. Anybody have any info on that?
I don't know if they moved them over, and I have to admit how we completely forgot about those sound booths over at Animal Kingdom.
We did. Well, that just, I think, is a testament to how tucked away they were.
Where were they, is what I'm trying to think.
They're in Conservation Station, aren't they?
Yes. So
Rafiki's, right?
Rafiki's, now is Rafiki's Planet Watch, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
I am permanently in Animal Kingdom circa 1999.
Yeah,
Jason.
1.0 there.
So
I thought you were talking about two separate places. I didn't even know this.
So if you walked into Conservation Station, I think you just kind of headed towards the back. There was this area there were like cardboard cutout trees to kind of get you go back to that place called the...
Well, that's always a weenie and a lure to get you in, huh? Cardboard trees.
Yeah, well, I guess plywood, not so much cardboard.
I just knew when you got back there off that train and past the petting zoo, right? That's where the petting zoo is.
Yes.
You would go inside and you could see them like doing surgery on a monkey or an orangutan, like they'd be taking out a spleen or something. Or you go over and have like some displays and read about the ecology and Jiminy Cricket. That's where the first time I ever did a Jiminy Cricket meet and greet was back there.
Oh.
They would just have him standing there in Conservation Station.
He's got environmentality, you know.
Absolutely. He was their like their official mascot of Earth Day and stuff.
Recycling.
And then there were just these booths because there wasn't a lot to do back there. And they would have you just would happen upon these sound booths to go in and listen to like nature sounds. And
got one email here from Dave. He kind of goes into it. He says he remembers a set of 6 soundproof booths in Rafiki's Planet Watch where you could listen to the sounds of nature. I believe each booth had 2 sets of headphones and you could listen to a selection of sounds like the rainforest and things like that. He remembers sitting in one in either 96 or 98 for probably half an hour with his brother while they enjoyed the experience. The whole time my parents had no idea where we were and were frantically searching the whole of the Planet Watch area. I believe the booths are still there along the west wall, but not in use any longer. Anyway, I just thought it went along with the sounds theme and wanted to know if my mind made the whole thing up or if anyone else remembers this. So that's from Dave.
So I heard recently that they were removed and they were replaced with a Disney animation display.
Oh.
So I think they are gone. Now, the thing we'd have to figure out, Todd, is whether they were removed at Disney MGM and then opened, if they were actually physically transported from one place to the other, which I don't think they were. Because honestly, it's just a room.
It's just a room. I can't imagine the rooms, but maybe the speakers, or if that really was expensive technology. But then again, this is many years later.
It's
and
headphones and a Laserdisc player or a CD player. It's really not a super, a control. Basically, it was like one button that would go to a show control to dim the lights and start playing, a CD player that probably had time code on it. So it was not super complicated.
How you're getting me excited, because if it's not super complicated, we could build one of these.
Oh, we could 100% build one of these.
I think we need to. And then we'll do then we'll build World Cake.
Todd, if I can build a styrofoam head to walk around and record in 3D sound, certainly I can record something to turn off some lights. I mean, we could all do this now with our, Alexa devices and smart home stuff. We don't even need fancy things. We could say, Alexa, play Sound Stations, and the lights could dim.
Right.
And she could start playing the music. So I encourage everyone to set this up in your homes now, because it should be easy.
Okay, so that's the sound booth. We had quite a few of those. We also had some good celebrity stories, which I saved up here for everybody. First one is from somebody with a great name, Brian. He says, good morning, gentlemen. I wanted to combine 2 things, Foley and celebrity sightings. In the early 2000s, we were having dinner at Cinderella's royal table. Seated at the table across from us was professional wrestler Mick Foley and his family. He tried to snap an inconspicuous picture, but forgot to turn the flash off on his camera. He shot me a look that clearly stated he was less than pleased with my unsolicited photo op. I'm sure he's a nice guy and might have been fine with it if I'd asked, but after that look, I was too intimidated to try. So, Brian, we appreciate that. That's a good one. I'm just curious if the photo came out, or did you do the cover up real fast in the middle of that? But this being the early 2000s, I'm guessing he had a actual film camera. And when that flash went off, I mean, unless it was like some kind of red eye reduction thing that it should have taken. So if you have the picture, Brian, share it with us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And on our second celebrity story, this is from Katie. She says she's listening to the Blaze Pleasure Island podcast. Great job. She had an anecdote to share related to celebrity sightings and being able to stay in the castle suite in the year outside of the Year of a Million Dreams sweepstakes. So that promotion must have ended. And she was an event planner working at Disney World and handled many of the catering and event logistics for the talent performing at the 2010 Disney Christmas Parade. Mariah Carey and her family stayed in the Castle Suite for the taping of her segment. It is my understanding that this was offered to her. As one would expect, she had an extensive talent rider, which included a certain type of couch and some pretty wacky things to ask for. She did stay at resorts on property at other times that she visited or performed.
Do you think the couch was like those big red lips? Like, it's like 80s.
Oh, like in Pee Wee Herman, Cherry and the lips. Yeah, that's right.
Now, I'm imagining
Spencer Gifts. Did they must have sold that.
It's actually an inflatable couch.
Sounds like a hammock or Schlemmer item.
Yeah. Geez, I remember those couches being for sale in some catalog for a while there.
Yeah, absolutely. They must have been.
I believe it's called the Maryland because it was supposed to be fashioned after her lips. It's a very famous couch, the Maryland couch.
Oh, the Mae West. Mae West.
What other podcast do you get that talks about a lip-shaped couch?
Yeah. Well, here it is. It was the Mae West Lip Sofa. It's a sculpture in the form of a sofa by Salvador Dali.
We're coming all back to St. Pete.
There we go. Yeah, Salvador Dali Museum.
And let's see, on TwoModern.com, $1,100 will get you one, but there's a miniature version on Lumens.com for $380. So,
we should get that for the next retro.
Do you know what would be great for Yvonne?
That'll be her.
Yvonne is one of our big listeners. I would like her to interview the big lips with the tiny microphone.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Don't you think that would be fantastic?
I think that's fantastic.
Now, we don't know if Mariah actually sat on this couch. It's just as you guys just went off here on this. But
now this is interesting. There is a Marilyn Monroe lip sofa, so I wonder if that's a competition to the or a production version of the Mae West one, because this one is apparently made in Italy in 1971.
All right, now hear me out. Let's say it was the lip sofa that Mariah Carey wanted in the Castle Suite. Mm-hmm. Did they have to bring that down Main Street, or is there a utilidor under the castle that they can take it up hidden? Or was that lip sofa? Oh, there is.
Yes, there is a utilidor and a freight elevator in the castle.
Yeah.
Because they got to get all the food stuff.
Yeah, how do you think King Stefan had a banquet without anybody seeing what he was serving? Right,
his servants did it all.
Just through the what do they call it? The keep, up to the keep, and
yeah.
They would catapult whole sides of beef up into the upper windows.
The chicken's flying over. If we didn't say at the beginning of the show that we do not have show notes for tonight, so it is going to be a little free form as we move forward here.
Just like Walt Disney World in the early days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No plans.
Monorail might be going clockwise. It might be going counterclockwise today. You don't know.
All right. Well, speaking of monorails, Todd, Michael Landis wrote us, and he said, "Hey guys, a couple episodes ago, you briefly talked about the monorail and how riding in the front was super awesome and why we can't do it anymore." He says, we neglected an important part of the experience, the monorail driver's license.
That's right.
And he sent us a picture of one, and I'm not sure if you guys have one of these, but it was like a little business card they'd give you after you rode up front and write your name on it and all that. So
I did get one years ago. There was also a monorail pilot's certificate they would give you. I have one of those. It was an 8.5 by 11 that was done in the 90s. If it's not scanned on the site, I'll make sure that we do get it scanned in there. But there was also the Grand Prix Raceway had even up into the early 2000s they gave away driver's license as well.
Oh, you can buy one now.
Oh, you got to buy it. I'm sorry.
Kiosk.
Okay.
Oh, that was my favorite little giveaway.
Yeah, it's a nice thing.
It was actually I saw them again. It wasn't a race car license. It was a thing that you joined their race team.
Oh.
You were officially a member of the race team.
Look at that. You go over to Pirates, though, they charged you for the doubloon, but they're pirates, so.
That's their whole deal.
That's their deal.
Okay, so thank you, Michael. Next up is from Miranda, and this is just a general question she wanted answered, and I thought it'd be nice to throw in something simple for the fellas here. She says, when did the Plaza Restaurant in Magic Kingdom open in its current location? Was there a secondary location, perhaps?
So here's part of the confusion, perhaps, is that there were at one time two restaurants that had the word Plaza attached to it. there was the Plaza Pavilion, which is the small restaurant next to the Borden ice cream. Well, now it's Edie's ice cream store on the right-hand side of Main Street as you turn and go towards Tomorrowland. But actually, no, that's the Plaza Restaurant. But next to that was the very large Plaza Pavilion restaurant, which is now called the Tomorrowland Terrace. So I'm not sure which one of those two restaurants you might be talking about. At one point, that door was actually open between the two, and then that was closed up. So it is possible that it started out as an indoor, more indoor seating for the ice cream parlor, because the ice cream parlor has no indoor seating, and then as the Magic Kingdom was desperate for restaurants after the debacle of October, December of 1971, I think it became quickly a freestanding restaurant on its own, because all of a sudden during that time period there was an explosion of restaurants where they built the Plaza Pavilion, and they got Chicken and Fish open, which is the Columbia Harbor House, and the Ventureland Veranda opened up, and they added the seasonal the Pirate and the Parrot restaurant, and all of a sudden there were like restaurants like crazy, because there were hardly any restaurants open when the Magic Kingdom opened up in October of 71.
Hey, you could get ham and cheese sandwiches. What more did you need?
You could absolutely get ham and cheese sandwiches. I mean, why would you pass up the Monte Cristo on Main Street? You couldn't do that, but yeah, so write us back and let us know if we're in the ballpark on the Plaza Restaurant you're talking about.
All right, Miranda, we're passing it back to you. So next one and final one. This one is going to encompass a few different messages we got. This is from Joe. He says, "Great podcast. Wish it was more than monthly. On the recent episode, you asked listeners if there were celebrities that showed up in more than one attraction at Disney parks. And we got quite a few messages about this. I'm going to name the couple that Joe says, and you guys can chime in with the other ones you heard. He mentioned Walter Cronkite being narrator in Spaceship Earth in Epcot, and he also appeared with Robin Williams in the film that was at the animation building, and some people were actually giving us the name of that film.
Oh, Back to Neverland.
There you go.
Yep.
And so I mean, there was a few that we got. Was Martin Short brought up, I believe, in a couple things?
Right.
We brought that up.
Walter Cronkite, Robin Williams. There was another individual too. Oh, Gary Sinise, right? Somebody said it was Gary Sinise, but I don't believe we found that. And then
they ended up correcting themselves. They confused him with. They thought he was in the Test Track film for some reason.
Right. Yeah. And then the other one was it Bill Nye the Science Guy?
Bill Nye the Science Guy came up a lot. Walt Disney came up a lot.
He visited all 4 parks.
Yeah, well, he was in a lot of different attraction.
And he had that dish of ice cream every night there.
Every night. That's why they put the ice cream facing Magic Kingdom.
So yeah, that's it wasn't anything too groundbreaking. We heard we kind of named a few. We got a couple other ones, but like we were hoping there'd be someone we didn't catch, but there was a few out there. So thanks, Joe, for that. All right, that's going to do it for listener mail this month. If you have something to tell us, a story, memory, or any questions, write us. Podcast at RetroWDW.com. Any and all messages have a chance to be read live on a future episode, and we look forward to getting all of your notes every month. So thank you for sending those.
All right, gentlemen. Well, it's about time we started to talk about the 50th here. Before we do that, I think we also...
Are you turning 50, Tom?
Almost. I got a couple more years yet, so we'll celebrate that maybe.
You and I turned 50 together.
That's right. Yeah, so. Only a few months apart. You're my brother from another mother, only a few months apart, my other twin. So, so what's amazing about this 2021, gentlemen, I wanted to take a moment, too, So in 6 years, we've accomplished 71 full episodes and a handful of, what do we call them, mini episodes or their interviews and stuff. So if anybody's concerned, we're not running out of topics yet, right, Hal? You and I are working on a few things, and we're busting myths. We're doing research. We got a lot of different things to
Oh, my gosh, the work we've been doing on a couple of very obscure topics is ridiculously amazing.
Well, we want to put some things.
Is one of the topics Walt's favorite flavor of ice cream?
Scotch mist.
Scotch and cigarettes.
Ash and Scotch. That's what it's called.
Now you're giving me ideas for retro magic. Scotch mist ice cream.
Here we go. Just a little right on the top.
Dessert. Do that. That could be nice.
That's the VIP only event.
That's very good. So we were really struggling what to do about a 50th anniversary episode because we can go back and do top 50 this or top 25 times 2 but we had discussed a couple different options and nothing really rang true to how do you celebrate all that's happened in Walt Disney World for 50 years. Plus we're retro focused and we want to focus on what has happened in the past. We've got that 25-year rule that we bend it now and then. But I think the important part is what Brian came up with. So I'm going to let him here in a second tell everybody a little bit about what we're going to do tonight, because we're going to turn it into a little more of a personal story, if you will. Right, Brian?
Well, the reason most people listen to our show is because they have memories of the parks and the resort in their past as they experience them, as they remember them, that means something to them. There's a connection there, which is why they want to listen to us talk about the way things used to be, either experiencing them or having an interest in them because the parks mean something to them today. And so as we try to think of what we should talk about for this momentous occasion, what we really decided was, it means something to each of us too. And each of us have stories of experiences there, things we love, things that mean something to us, that this would be a good opportunity to share them and talk about them and, probably spur some of you to talk about your own memories that you have there and reasons that the parks are important to you, because they're important to a lot of people. I mean, we meet so many passionate people who care about certain things in these parks, and it's great to have a community to share that with.
Right. So we're going to all kind of go through some of the memories and things that, some of these stories you may have heard about before. And, certainly some of them for our new listeners will be new stories, things that brought us together, things that, memories we have and things that are important to us as individuals and our families and how we relate to Walt Disney World. I know my story is unique to Howe's, which is unique to JT's, and which is unique to Brian, but we all have a common thread in what we enjoy, especially the historical aspect of it too. So I guess, gentlemen, who would like to go first and start to discuss what?
I think we can probably do round robins here where we each kind of throw one out as we go around. Okay. And but I'll talk about a couple of things first. One of the things, as you ponder, and I think we do that a little more than most people as we think about the parks and why they connect to people. One experience I've had more than once there is the ability to disconnect when you're there. And it is unique to Walt Disney World because it's a self-contained 43 square mile complex that if you are staying on property or spending your time just on the border of property, when you're there, particularly in the era before smartphones were attached to our hips. But when I'm there, I find I am less engaged in social media. I'm not constantly checking Twitter. I do look at Instagram maybe when I'm in the line. But for the most part, when I'm there, the outside world is not around. And I have a couple of memories of things that happened there that speak to this. One of them was I happened to be there the week of the Sandy Hook shootings, the school shootings, when a bunch of elementary school kids were killed. And I am so thankful I was there because I was not watching the news. I became aware that it happened. But I was there with my sister and her family and a friend of mine. And I remember standing in Epcot the one night next to my friend who had seen the news the day before. And we were watching Illuminations. And she was crying. Now, Illuminations was one of them that, in fact, I have it on my list tonight, that always would bring a tear to my eye as I got older and sentimental about it. I just always thought it was a beautiful show. But she turned to me at one point, she says, I don't understand how everybody is just going about their lives right now, but I do. And, when you're in those parks, there's just, I mean, isn't that what Walt wanted?
Yep.
You know, his idea was to create a place that would kind of surround you and envelope you and leave your cares of the world outside. And so that's one example. I do have a more personal one, although I always think of military families too. You see them there. Disney has marketed heavily to them even before Shades of Green was on the property as a military resort. You know, when these men and women who were stationed overseas away from their families come home, the way Shades of Green got there was the Department of Defense surveyed their members as to where they would they would most want a rest and recreation place created. And the overwhelming survey of service members was Orlando, Florida. And that's how Shades of Green got there. It's the first domestic rest and relaxation facility built by the military. And, you know, I love seeing those families walking through the parks. And, you know, they've been away from each other. God knows what the service member has been through. And they just want to come and experience something with their family and be immersed with them. And they get to do that there. My last story along this lines is a woman who was the superintendent of our school system here years back, was a friend, and she lost her husband to cancer at a fairly young age. Her daughter was 6 or 7 at the time, and as a lot of families do after they go through something that traumatic, she decided to take her daughter to Disney World a few months later. I don't believe it was a coincidence, but it was during the year of a million dreams, and they were selected as the family to stay in the castle for the night when they got there. And so, you know, going through this traumatic thing, taking her daughter away, trying to get their mind off things, I am sure someone probably told Disney about this family that was coming and what they'd been through. But, you know, just what a memory, what a special place. What a special role that it plays in the lives of people who are looking to escape and get away.
Yeah. Brian, I have to check off. I had something on my list of 10 here that says a feeling of away from everything when there. And I echo that. And as a child, I remember being there and seeing a newspaper sitting on the Polynesian check-in desk and going, oh, wow, there's news. There's stuff going on because you did check out that much. And it is very easy to completely get away from absolutely everything. You know, in today's, I love that you say that you get away from social media because I feel that same way. I get away from that. I get away from email. I get away from the everyday. There is an escape quality to that resort that I've yet to find something else that pulls you that distant from your everyday life. Now, how you might feel a little different. You're living close to it for many years and going off, and you might not have that same feeling. So I'm curious to see what you say to it, or do you get that? And as I got older, I think that feeling of away from everything started to get away a little bit, but I made sure that when I go down there, I want to feel that way, and I've been able to maintain it, which is great.
Yeah. So I think some of the issue with me, I definitely felt somewhat like that, and I'll get into that when I have a whole thing about that, especially from when I was younger that I'll get into later. But as I got older, I personally felt like that bubble kind of disappeared, and I think a lot of that is the familiarity with it, being an annual pass holder. You know, when I was at the height of going every other weekend for 2-3 years, it's like that definitely takes away the specialness of it, and it gives you an intimacy to the park that is different from when you're a visitor. And the only way I can try to describe it, and if we have any cast members who are listening, I think they're probably going to feel that, you know, something to this. I used to work at this restaurant when I was a teenager called GD Ritzy's. And I remember I would go to the restaurant when I was, before I worked there, and order burgers and then I started working there. And once you start working someplace and you're there all the time, you have a very different view of what the space looks like. You suddenly see the space in a different way. And even after I quit and I came back again, it's like once you've mopped the floor and been in the freezer and you can't interact with that space like you did if it's your first or second time going there. You just know it all too well, and you have all this stuff attached to it. So it's definitely a lot more difficult, I think, for me or someone who goes all the time.
Yeah.
To have that pure escapism like you wish you would.
I did feel that pure escapism. I think what's interesting is that when we did do trips 6 months apart, you would be sitting on a ride and I was just here 6 months. All right, well, we'll go through. So I can only imagine what it would be like for a park holder to try to experience that.
Oh, this is to me one of the great dangers of being a pass holder, and anyone who is a new pass holder or is thinking about becoming a pass holder, you will not fundamentally ever be able to experience the park the way that you did when you went and visited once every year or once every 2 years, because all of a sudden you start looking for and noticing. Even if you're not looking for it, you start noticing the little differences. That light bulb is burned out. That figure is not moving. You start to see all the flaws that you would never see as a casual visitor. Right. And I personally don't believe the parks were really designed, at least initially, for an annual pass type situation where you're there every day, or a couple of times a week, or you go there and you meet your friends and you hang out. That's not how the parks were designed to be used. And in a lot of ways, using them that way has fundamentally changed even how I think the parks operate on the upswing. I think it's made the food better.
Right. Yeah. I also think too, when Brian and JT and we have to travel to get there. And that is part of the excitement, the build. To this day, I'm 47 years old, and I still love knowing and still love planning and still love clicking the little button to know that I've got my stuff. And we, as buddies and brothers here, we track each other's flight. Look, Brian's over North Carolina. There's a picture from Todd from 30,000 feet, and JT just landed. That adds to it. So when it becomes an event outside of just showing up at the doorstep of something that's 30 minutes away, it adds to that excitement and that realism that you are escaping because you are not 30 minutes from your bed.
Yeah, and it's still because it's a one-time or a two-time or maybe a six-time event for you per year. There's still something that you're looking forward to because it's not like you can just hop in the car and like me, an hour and a half later you're there and you're just
That's funny how I-4 in an hour and a half.
Right,
Shut up. That doesn't happen anymore.
And on Saturday mornings, if you leave at 6
you leave at 6.
Yeah. It ends up being you're angry we're just frustrated because of the traffic. Actually that is that we don't go very often because we are so sick and tired of getting to Champions Gate and sitting in 30 minutes of traffic just so cars can cycle in and off of the highway in one location. It makes us not want to go. There's a lot of things that have become a detriment to us going that keeps us from going rather than encouraging us to go. As a local, that you guys,
they need an auto train from Tampa St. Pete to Orlando to Lake Buena Vista.
We honestly kept hoping that they would do the high-speed rail thing, and it may happen someday. It hasn't happened yet, but we keep hoping.
So let me ask this to you, gentlemen. Then we've all feel away from everything. Brian, you brought up a good point with Sandy Hook. Things happen that, for lack of better terms, break the fourth wall, right? And to use a quote from the television industry, right? Breaking the fourth wall, for those that don't know, is when you're on a sitcom, there's generally 3 walls that you always see. The fourth wall is the camera. So when you talk to the camera, you break the fourth wall. So what I'm saying here is there's things from the outside that break that fourth wall, making you realize that the reality is still out there. Brian, you mentioned Sandy Hook. For me, it was... I remember watching Indiana Jones and the space shuttle taking off while we were watching Indiana Jones. Whoa. Wait a minute. All of a sudden, I'm not watching Indiana Jones in this. I'm not in Cairo. I'm not immersed in this. Life is going on. And
that happens to me when I walk down, Hollywood Boulevard, and all of a sudden a skywriter tells me that Jesus loves me.
Well, he does.
Or to go to Rosie's.
Go to Rosie's. JT, what about you? What have you seen? What have you felt in this, this type of thing?
Honestly,
and you drive down, so you have a different perspective.
Well, I was going to go earlier on the build-up. I think you guys don't have the same perspective of build-up as I do, because as a kid, I remember watching the camper get packed for a week, watching my dad pack bearings and check tires and make sure we're good. And, I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have made that trip, but, I mean, I just made it a couple weeks ago. Every state has its own little identity. And I check in on places on Swarm, and it's like, you were in this gas station, 3 years ago. And you're like, that's right, I was, and I bought a Coke there. So the buildup was much bigger as a kid. 15 hours in the car. That AM radio station was a huge deal for us.
Yeah. JT, you're leaving out, for me, those drives, and we did do them, not family, but I did them with my friends 3 or 4 times. Stopping at the convenience stores along the highway to get gas, the different sodas and snacks in the different states that I had never seen before. Like, that was part of the experience.
Yep, totally. And even for us, we only went to, as a kid, we went every spring break, and we only went to one park. So getting to that, finally walking into the Magic Kingdom, I mean, you got to imagine, go back like 2 weeks before that of prepping and then sitting at Fort Wilderness and doing everything. It's like, are we going to go? No, not yet. Quit asking. No, not yet. And then you finally get there. I mean, getting to that park was insane. It was such a buildup. It was such a big deal. And it's kind of the same way now, just leading up to it, packing up the kids and all that stuff. But as far as like a fourth wall goes, I mean, it really, to me, it's just when you kind of look at your bank account and you start looking at how much money you spent, that's the fourth wall for me on these trips. You're like, whoa, geez. This added up quick, but yeah, that's. I can't really think of any specific event though that I was down there for.
Well, I wanted to tell you guys. I mean, we've mentioned it before. My first trip. I wanted to kind of explain to everybody how I have those memories, and it is kind of why we're here today a little bit. For me, I was really excited in 1980 because I got to leave. I told my kindergarten teacher that I was going, and that was like, she's like, it's January, you're not going till October. And I'm like, I'm going to Disney World. I'm going to get school off. Like, that was more of the attraction, that I was actually going to be able to do homework on the airplane. That was thrilling to me. But what came out of that was a photo album that my mom put together. We've since scanned it. We've scanned the films, and I always bring up the films because at a young age, at 6 years old, the films and the photos became my memory. And, I know how your first trip, you were too young to remember, and there may not be films or photos of that trip.
So far, we haven't found it yet.
You haven't found it. When we do, you do know somebody who can restore those.
I do. If
okay,
we do,
good.
Well, so I will preface that by they I believe wouldn't allow them to take photos on that bus tour of the construction
the
site.
early one, right?
So yeah. Now we did find my 1973 film, which I poorly shot, so I don't have the film anymore because I think my sister ended up. But we do have my April 1973 8 millimeters that I've reviewed, and photographs from 73, 74, and 75 at least in my possession. So yeah, it's funny to look back on those. In some ways, it's a Magic Kingdom I don't even recognize anymore because they're, although there are a lot of things that have not changed, there's a lot of things that have changed, and I know I personally have definitely reached a point where I have to reference things that were there rather than things that aren't there if I'm talking to somebody to like navigate through the park.
Yeah. So like me, those films and photos really are what give you your memory of the time, because you may not have remembered it. I know I didn't really remember it as a 6-year-old child, but I remember it through the photos. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there whose first trip was when they were very young, and the only way of remembering. A lot of the films we get from people in videos. I was just working on one today. There was this little girl sitting in Barbie, and I'm like, it's 1994. This girl is 30-some years old now. You're close to it. And that is her memory, right? That's exactly what that memory is. So, I just wanted to say that because I feel that the films really and the photos really started to bring us together. I have a little more on it a little later. I want to mention, but that's for me how I really started to focus on what my first trip really was and what kind of hooked me.
Yeah, and I love it when listeners either tweet us directly old photos that they've taken, or I'm scrolling through Twitter and I see pictures that someone. It's just so neat to see people enjoying the park and having a good time, and it's interesting always to see what they chose to take pictures of, because there are a lot of commonalities as we have found out.
Oh.
But
I watched 2 parades tonight, just so you know. 2 parades with Mickey leading it and going crazy.
I mean, we always get pictures on the Jungle Cruise. We always get pictures of people standing in front of the flower market.
Yep.
We always get, there are some things that are universal, but then there's always the oddball, it's people taking pictures in places that you didn't expect. And you're like, where is that? And you're like, oh, now I know where that is.
Yeah, remember every now and then we would see someone would take a picture of the backside of that the Swiss themed the chalet themed Skyway station, like that dip down, and we'd look at it and like, where is that?
We had no idea. It wasn't marked as a Kodak photo spot, right? So it's like
correct. Well, Kodak wasn't in the parks until
GAF.
the 80s. Yeah,
right, we'll just call it a photo spot. How's that?
Yeah.
How's that? So, JT, what are some of the things that you've been, mulling over? You're in a similar position as me. You are going now with children, right, at a young age. My trips down there again restarted after I had a son. Went down at age 3. How I hate to discount you, but you've been there all the time. I'm trying to find the assimilation here.
Well, you have to remember, there's 3 phases of my life. That's true. There's the driving down once a year phase. Then there's the going all the time phase. Then I took a break through the 2000s, and then had kids of my own and started going back, as a family. So I've
the family man phase.
I've lived all of those lives. Yes.
Right. Yeah. And I think I've done similar, where it was my parents and grandparents took me down. Then I went on my own through college and with buddies. I did the same thing. I took the break, and I only went back after, my son was born, and we said, hey, let's go down to Disney, and re-sparked and rekindled. And really what was interesting is that the magic that was lost over the years of that I wasn't going was all of a sudden regained while watching my son see it through his eyes.
There you go.
And experiencing, and I was here with my parents and my grandparents and all this, and taking a picture of him 6-7 years in a row pointing to the brick that my grandfather purchased. That's huge for me. So JT, you got 2 kids. You went down with Lily for the first time when she was 2 or 3, or maybe even younger. I don't remember. You've been down there for
18 months.
18 months. Look at that. She was getting in free.
We never quit going. I mean, that's kind of the thing. We went through high school. We went through college.
So you don't have the phases that Hal and I.
No, we just kept going. And I will say, we had a weird one this year where I keep going back to Fort Wilderness, but we do different things that are throughout the years. But it's funny to do the same thing with my kid that I did as a kid. So we had a flat tire last trip of all things, and I had to take my car to the auto center. I'd never been there. I'm taking this opportunity to go to the AAA Car Care Center. And I go, well, we're close to Fort Wilderness. Let's drop the tire off. We'll go see my family who is staying there. And I had my skateboard, she had her scooter, and I did what I did when I was a kid, rode a scooter around Fort Wilderness. And I'm watching my daughter do this, and it was just kind of like this weird screwed with your mind a little bit. But like you said, you see it through her eyes, and then the other end is like she's not old enough yet to start. She's just learning how to read, but she's kind of starting to pick up on things, and she's asking me questions about things. And it's funny, she has a good source to ask questions to, because most times I know the answer when we're standing there, or I just message you guys and ask you the question. But yeah, you get this different perspective of it with your kids. And now my son, who's about to turn 3, he hates rides so far. So it's kind of pointless to take him, but he'll come around eventually.
Brian, what about you? Did you take a break in the middle too? I mean, you don't have children, so you see it through a friendship way almost, right?
Well, right. I have no children that I know of. My experience was that first trip, which is actually on my list, 1988. And then I didn't go again until 1995. Like, it was like I went as a 13-year-old, and then it was, as I went through my teen years, like, I got to get back there. So as a young adult, I arranged a trip driving down with my buddies, and then didn't go again until I started, working full time as a career. And it became like an annual trip. It was a big deal because there was going with my parents and my brother and sister, and then going with, my young friends. And then as my nieces and nephews started to get older, those trips with friends would be interspersed with first starting to go with siblings and their kids. And that was a whole different experience. I mean, you get tangentially, you get some of the parental experience there of just the joy of seeing my nieces and nephews experience these rides and, experience these shows. And, my nephew Anthony sings the Tiki Room song, when he was little. He came home, he loved the Tiki Room song, and especially Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow. Like, he was 6 years old running around singing that, and I remembered how much I loved it when I first heard it. And, it's great to have those connections. So I have had that experience. Now, especially in the years since we started the show, and my friend base in Florida has expanded, and I have these friends from all over the world that I meet there, not generally planned. We just happen to be there at the same time, and a bunch of folks who live there. So now, I just tonight had a conversation with a friend because, we're planning to be there at the end of the month, both you and me, at separate trips. Yeah. And she's like, "What, you go somewhere else?" And I said, "No." I said, "This is a solo trip for me." I said, "But I'm going to a place where I've got 30 friends, where I have people who work there, people who live down there, right. So every meal is with another friend, catching up with people. And that was a hard part of the pandemic. Was even if I did travel down, most of them, were being very cautious, and you couldn't go inside to dine anywhere. And, I remember friends I hadn't seen in a year. We ended up eating in this gigantic hotel lobby because nobody wanted to eat indoors, So it's an adjustment. But yeah, it's a different experience, I think, every trip you take. And I'm sure those of you, before you had kids, going with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or that's a different experience than going with your family and then going with, your own family.
Absolutely. So I have a couple little personal things that memories I wanted to share here that I think we've, I mentioned my son helping me get back into it, so to speak, after the drought. One of the ones I think we mentioned after my mom had passed away was that I remember really distinctly one night we were walking to the monorail, and like, oh, we found out the Magic Kingdom was open later. It was open to midnight. Like, oh my God, midnight, you're 12 years old. It's like exciting, right? And the rest of the family went back. So she and I and my brother said, screw it, we're going in. We went in the park, and then I remember that they were running fireworks twice. It was like 9, and then they did something at 10, and something happened at 11. I forget what it was. But anyway, so it was late. The fireworks were going off, and we're standing in line for Peter Pan. And the way the queue is, right? You kind of go in under that shelter, and you're trying to watch the fireworks and all that stuff. And I never forgot that night, because it was my mom just saying, fine, let your grandparents and your father and your brother, your sister go back, where the three of us are going to stay out and have fun. And I was there many years later. I think it was in 2017 or so. And that whole feeling came back to me. I was in Fantasyland. The park was open late. The fireworks came back. It was a year after she had passed. And I had a tear in my eye because all of a sudden it just brought back that memory. And it was just amazing how just something like that can be so powerful and bring you back to that moment, bring you back to that person. And really was a powerful moment for you. So like you, Brian, there are moments, whether it's brought on by music or events or things that happen while you're there, that, get the best of me and choke me up.
Plus 2, you had the gold key, so you could go in and out as you pleased anytime.
Because it was
They threw a
fantastic.
lobster at you as you went through the turnstile, actually.
He could actually
Here, chew on this
He
while
could
you're
actually
in line.
pick the lobsters out of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and they would prepare them by the side for him, after he got off the ride.
Did we give this guy a Chevy Cavalier yet? He's a gold key guy. Yeah.
Just one, Brian. I'll give him a second for his brother.
All right, let's inform the listeners who are new what this joke is, or if you haven't caught on after 71 episodes. My grandfather was he loved the gold, what he called the gold key plan. I don't know if it was ever officially called that, but anyway.
It was.
Was it called the gold key? Okay.
Yes, that was called.
And you literally got a plastic credit card that had a gold key on it. I think it was maroon if you're at the Floridian. It was blue for the Contemporary and green for the Polynesians. We always had a green one. He loved stand-up. Anyway, long story short, this was before Disney Dining Plan. This was before Food and Fun. That's something we got to talk about one of these days, the Food and Fun plan. And what would happen is that you basically prepaid all your meals with the exception of alcohol, including tips. And when you went in with this, you would show it to any waiter or waitress, and their eyes would light up because they knew they didn't care what you ordered. They knew you didn't care what you ordered. And the more that they bought you, the more tip they made because it was automatically included. So you were literally treated like royalty. And we've joked about it because my grandfather always loved going. I think 3 times I went down there on the gold key, and he'd be like, "Have at it, kid. Get what you want." And I would ask if they had things, and like, "Yeah, we'll make that for you." They didn't care. They just bought whatever. So I remember the one night we were at the Pepite Bay Veranda at night. It was our first night there. Everybody was on the gold key. Grandfather splurged, and I think the entire table, except probably my sister, had filet mignon. We're just sitting there. Oh, it's just fantastic. And anyway, so now the guys rag on me, like, "Oh, you're on the gold key plan." So, but
we're just
it's
jealous.
fantastic.
Todd. We're just jealous.
I'll sport you guys a filet mignon
because everybody loves our little Reader's Digest side notes. Gold Key was a Cadillac program dating back to 1926 where they would deliver your vehicle to you, and the keys were actually plated in 24-karat gold.
Really? Wow.
So straight up through the 90s, your Cadillac keys were often gold keys.
The fun thing about it was that they would process it like a regular credit card. They would actually do the remember when you would actually slide a credit, like
when you would frank a card,
yeah. And your name was on it, and they would do something with that. Your name was imprinted onto it, and you had to sign for it. So my grandpa would say, "Why don't you pick up the tab tonight, Tom?" And I'd sign for it, and I'm like, "Yeah, well, Grandpa, you're gonna have to pay for the alcohol, though." "Oh, I'll pay for that separately for the probably the Miller Lite he had or something."
That's along the same lines. That's my, I told the story many years back of the getting our trip to Disney World, the first trip to Disney World, Christmas Eve, 1987. My parents came in while we were having our Christmas Eve party and handed my sister and me and my brother a box, and we each opened it, and it was a set of travel brochures. I have pictures of them. We can put them in the show notes. I shared them years back, but and it was, it was thrilling. Hey, next month we're going to Disney World, and I remember so many places. There are spots in the parks that even today I walk by them and I think, I was here with Dad.
Yeah.
And
sure.
My dad's been gone for 17 years. And, I to this day, I remember those moments and places, near 35 years, 37 years, whatever it is, ago, 33. Math was never my subject. But I think about that, especially. I think it was part of why I was kind of bummed out. I was never been a downtown Disney fan, but I'm especially not a Disney Springs fan. And I have such fond memories of walking through the shopping village with my parents, because we went to dinner on the Empress Lily one night and spent the night in the shops. And then our last day there before we flew home, we spent a couple hours in the village shopping. And I have pictures with my parents that last morning down there in the village and outside the Empress Lily, and I strong memories of being there with them. And I think that's as you lose people from your life that you've experienced it with, I think it's common to remember certain places with them, and Disney World seems to be a very strong magnet for that.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and I fully understand what you're saying, Brian, is having people been through my life that are no longer here, as I mentioned, and my grandparents, and it is very, very, very strong. And Brian, I think to add to that is that I can still remember a time when I surprised my grandparents with a trip. I did this twice to them. They had no idea I was coming. And
the second one was to the nursing home. Come on, Grandpa.
We're going to Disney World again. Gold Key plan. Here you go.
They had flown down and stayed at the Polynesian, and I arrived. I planned it, and I remember I just went to the front desk. I said, tell Bernice Hadley that she has a package at the front desk to come get it. And I'll never forget her coming around that corner and from what was it? What was the name of the building they stayed in? What was the ones connected right to the Great Ceremonial House? How?
Oh, Bali High?
Bali High? No, it wasn't. Bora Bora. Was it Bora Bora? Okay. Yeah, the smallest one. Anyway, they loved staying in that because they didn't have to get wet to go to the monorail because it was all covered. So they loved it. So I remember her coming around the corner and just the look on her face, like, what are you doing here? You live on your own now. You're in an apartment. How are you in Disney World with us? And it was really amazing. And like I said, I did that twice, maybe even 3 times for them where they didn't expect me. And maybe they started to expect me probably at some point. I don't know.
He's here again, Leroy, looking for a free ride.
It was Joseph. But
hide your gold keys. Todd's in town.
Wants another lobster for free. This is going to cost us another $1,000.
He just kept coming down. Why does this kid keep showing up? Because he eats for free. That's why.
Right. Paying his own way down, and then he mooches off of us. So.
Oh, that's great.
No.
I want to do one.
Yeah, go JT.
All right, so let me get this back into. I like the memories. We're talking about places that are there.
Yeah.
And you think about these places, like if there's a place like I remember standing with my mom, if they ever bulldoze it or something, and the day she's gone, I would be bummed because it's gone. I have a memory of, we always used to take 2 or 3 days on vacation out of the week, and we would spend it at the beach and not the ocean. We'd go to the beach at Fort Wilderness. We'd be on Bay Lake, and it was like a beach day. You can't do that anymore. I mean, we'd sit there, we'd be at the sand, you'd go swimming. They even had like the swimming area roped off and buoyed up and all that. And we'd even get snacks at the marina there, which you can't get snacks there anymore. There used to be just like a Coke machine there recently. So do you guys have anything that is a closed thing or a closed attraction that you have a strong memory of that you're like, man, I wish I could do that one more time? I don't know if I want to swim in the water one more time right there, but and we definitely did it a lot. Now, everybody was fine, far as I know. So
if anybody says Horizons, I'm going to punch you. Okay, this has to be non-attractionist and non-Horizons based. So.
It could be any memory, yeah, anything you think of that was cool that's gone. Or
I have one that was really neat. Was before, and everybody knows this, but I knew it years before people knew and before it was popular. There was a hill at the Polynesian that overlooked the water. It was on the right-hand side. If you're on the beach, it kind of curled around. And now, right in front of it is where all the bungalows are. And prior...
I think you're talking about Sunset Point,
Sunset
right?
Point. But years ago, there was no way to get up there. Nobody really knew about that. There was a... eventually, they added a pathway, and you could go... I remember watching Wishes from up there. But even prior to that, nobody knew. You just had to walk on that razor blade grass. I don't know what it is that you have down there, how it's essentially you're walking on X-Acto blades to get out there.
Well, we have 2 kinds, Bahia and St. Augustine. St. Augustine is thicker.
Okay.
Bahia is thinner, but St. Augustine is, I don't think they have St. Augustine there. I think they probably have the Bahia, but who knows?
All right. Well,
it's definitely not soft northern grass.
No, it is not a fescue or a rye. That's for sure. But I remember that place. That's one of the things. And ironically, I don't have any special memories of it. But I just knew it was a place you could go, and nobody else really knew about it. And I also, one other thing I miss, before Fast Pass, I swear by it, there was always the left lane and the right lane when you were getting on a ride. Hal's nodding his head because
absolutely.
A lot of people are right-handed. We drive on the right, we gravitate to the right and the left-hand side. And some queues, it was actually physically shorter as well. But I miss that because now it's like
there was
pass, lightning speed, whatever. Now
there was a similar trick I used to do for walk-up restaurants like the Columbia Harbor House or Tomorrowland Terrace, Cosmic Rays, where there's a podium and the person who takes your order is at the podium and then you go up to the counter.
Yes.
Well, the procedure, which I figured out, is that they basically go back and forth. They go to the right-hand side, the left-hand side, the right-hand side, the left-hand side. If there were 10 people on the right-hand side and no one on the left-hand side, I would walk up to the left-hand side. They would take person number one's order on the right-hand side and then turn to me on the left-hand side and take my order. Yep. And the 9 people behind the one person on the right-hand side would be livid. But like, that's just the way the system worked. So there were things like that you could take advantage of.
They still do it at Typhoon Lagoon, and I think Tomorrowland Terrace or a couple of them still do it.
Yeah, some of the Picos Bills, wasn't that?
Yes. Although I have noticed lately that there's been a cast member who ushers people in and then points them to one of those stands to go to rather than just.
It's funny you mentioned that. How I read, not to diverge here, but every time I go to a checkout line at a grocery store, I look at the maximum inefficiency that it is. Right, you just pick a random line to go in. It is the worst possible queue system that we use for grocery stores. And what you're defining is what Disney's trying to do is maximize the queue. There have been lots of studies done. And the way to maximize a queue is you have everybody queue up in a single line and you send people to the next available spot. Mm-hmm. That is the absolute best way and the quickest way to work your way through a queue. Having people queue separately on their own intuition of what is going to happen next is the worst thing, because you get in somebody line at the grocery store, I've got coupons for everything. That's a reference to the Disney Channel right there. And if you didn't catch it, if anybody can catch it, I'm going to send a gift. You got to them. So you got to tell me what is that from and what happened when the person says, I've got coupons for everything, because it is from the Disney Channel. Subject line Disney Channel to contest at RetroWDW.com. So look, we got a contest out of it. I diverged a little bit, but airports do it the right way, right? Airports has a big line. You go, oh my God, the line's so long. That is the best way to get through a queue.
Interesting.
Best Buy does that too, and so does Kohl's.
There you go. Yeah, Marshalls is starting to do it. Home
Not
Goods.
Kohl's, somewhere else. TJ Maxx maybe.
TJ Maxx, yeah.
This yeah.
I do have a story about a place that is closed / inaccessible today.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is going back to 1973. So, just as it happened on my 5th birthday, we went to the Diamond Horseshoe Review, and I was volunteered to go up on stage with the traveling salesman as part of the act when he would do like the balloons and stuff. Now, it wasn't Wally Bogue and it wasn't Bev Beverman. It was somebody else, and I don't know. I haven't been able to identify who it is, but I do have a picture of me up on stage with him. And the thing that I remember was when he brought me up on stage, he's like, okay, I want you to stand right here on top of the trapdoor. And I knew enough of what a trapdoor was to like be wary of that. So I was terrified during the whole thing that I was standing over the trapdoor. And he had some kind of a sort of like a running gag set up with the drummer, where every time he would say trapdoor, the drummer would like, I don't know if he would hit the snare or something, but he would do something very loud, or the crash cymbal, and I would jump in the air. And I swear to God, they must have done this probably once they saw my reaction, they must have done it at least 4 or 5 times during the duration of the show.
We're going to play off of this kid, no doubt.
Right. Oh, because I was perfect for it. I was just terrified. And I remember he asked me if I was married, which is one of those like standard, like, you know, funny questions to ask a kid, because of course they say no. But just in a weird happenstance, it's like, we would always go down and stay with my niece, who was a year younger than me. And for some reason, either the day of, because the Magic Kingdom didn't open until like 10. So it was either that morning before we left or the day before, she informed me that we were married. and she gave me a ring. So when he asked me, "Are you married?" I was like, "Yes." And they're like, "To who?" And like I pointed out my niece in the front row, which was kind of funny. And apparently I must have made an impression, because as we were leaving when the show was over, these people kept going up to my parents and go like, "Wait, he isn't part of the show? He wasn't like a plant that's just like, no, he's just random kid who came that
just
day."
Our son.
So that's one of my, that is a place that I am very sad is closed, because not even because of that memory. It's like, I enjoyed going to that show over and over again. And that's something that I did with my family. My mom and dad and my niece, when she would come with us, multiple times. And then when I was older, I got to see it, of course, on my own before it was closed down. And that was such a great show, such a good old school comedy with singing and Can Girls. And that was on my list of, if there were things that could be brought back for the 50th that weren't super expensive to do and would give, people a good taste of what things were like back then. It's like, that was something I was really pulling for, hoping that would come back again. So I don't know. Guess we'll find out 4 days from now, or previous to 4 days from now, from whenever this podcast drops.
How about the shell lays at the luau? Do you remember the shell lays they would give out?
I never got to go to the luau.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, they used to give out these, what are those little, they're these kind of gray shells, but the inside they curl around
pearly
white.
shells.
What
from the ocean?
The pearly shells
shining in the sun
from the ocean.
And they look like a mouth. They got like a little mouth.
Yeah, they got little teeth on them. Yeah. And they would make it was generally they were drilled through, and they would tie them together with basically like fishing line. But there's a picture of me wearing one, and it was, I don't know why you got shells instead of flowers. Maybe it was cheap,
that's a very famous kind of a thing. They used to give those away too at Hilo Hattie's stores in Hawaii. The little shell necklaces, because they're super cheap.
Yeah. That's just
shells are free.
So if you want to see me wearing a shell necklace, it is on RetroWDW.com. So I don't know where to find it, but it's somewhere on there. We'll have to post that in the show notes.
Got to figure out. Hang on, let me find out. I'll find
out
what those.
Well, how's looking that up? I've got a question for you guys. When you go to Walt Disney World as a young child, you see it through a child's eyes, and there are levels of amazement. We've talked about how it pulls you away from reality, and as you get older, you learn what the color go away green is. You learn about forced perspective. You learn what a weenie is, or you start to be able to see that the door is open to the backstage, or you crane your neck, or you look on Google Maps and you know where the monorails go to sleep at night, right? And it's a struggle in my head sometimes to detach myself more as you learn more, right? And I find that that's an up and down thing for me. Maybe it's when I go too often, or twice in a year, that it's a little kind of repetitive, as we were talking about earlier. But I find that the more you know, a little bit less of that magic is there, and you got to figure out how to keep it in a way.
Doesn't this touch on one of our oft cited critiques of why the studio parks aren't as fascinating anymore? Because the process by which they make movies, The Lord of the Rings comes out and there's 72 hours of documentaries, behind the scene features, CD-ROMs, websites where you can see exactly how they did it.
Yeah.
And with computer graphics now, it's no wonder how they do things. But before that, figuring out how they made E.T. and how they made Jaws and how The Wizard of Oz was done was a fascinating subject for people interested in film, but not a thing that we knew.
Right.
I think the parks are the same way. We see a ride. I mean, when I was little, I got like, how'd they do that? That's so cool. Yeah. Look at Spaceship Earth. And this is well, now, Disney, we saw, 72 hours of stuff before they ever opened Frozen Ever After.
Right.
On how they were making Frozen Ever After, and the reveal of, I remember before they opened the Little Mermaid ride, like the big Disney parks video of showing you the Ursula animatronic and stuff. I mean, before the mystery used to be when you rode the ride, and now beforehand it's there. And then like tonight, none of us were in Florida when they premiered Harmonious, but all of us saw it.
Right.
And you know, there was a period of time before internet videos, you know, pre-YouTube and all, pre-2000, where the only way to experience this stuff, other than seeing Regis preview it for 20 seconds on a parade, was to go to the parks and see it. And, you know, there weren't 3-hour documentaries about Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. You had to go ride it. And so I think that takes some of the mystery that we used to revel in away.
Yeah. No, it's a good, excellent point.
I'll say, Todd, that's what's kept me into it. I love seeing how this stuff works. I like seeing when something breaks. I like seeing all these cast members get to, you know, I love the behind the scenes stuff now. It's so fun. But I'm also going back to my kid. I'm dancing this fine line of like, I want to tell her how this stuff works, but I also don't want to ruin it for her. Like, we did quite a bit on Tower of Terror because we both love that ride, but she's scared to death of it as a first grader. So we're like, it's not real. It's just this. And I even showed her the latest on Disney Plus, how it works. Still was scared to death to go on it. But, you know, you're like, you don't want to totally ruin it for somebody by telling them things. So most times when I know all this stuff, I usually don't say much until somebody asks me if I'm going with somebody that's never been or somebody that's, you know, kind of not interested in that and ruining the magic for them.
All right, I think, Brian, you've got something else you've been on your mind. You've been pondering this. You even gave us a list a few weeks ago of the different things you'd come up with, which prompted me to make a list that I've got in front of me. But what's something else you got here?
Well, we've all probably had stories, because we've been there enough, of non-traditional things, non-vacation things that have happened to us on vacation. So if you recall seeing my list, the last thing on my list was my kidney stone at the yacht club.
Yes, do tell.
2003, I was on the trip with my buddy Rob and my buddy Matt, and we were staying in the yacht club. That's my recollection anyway. We were staying in the yacht club, although Rob may correct me and say it was the Grand Floridian, but I think it was the yacht club. And it was a couple nights into our trip, and I was laying there in bed, and about 4 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, and I just had this very unfamiliar pain in my back that I had never experienced before. It's for those of you who've never had one, they tend to start like a dull, it's like someone has a knuckle, but it's on the inside of your back trying to get out, and just like with a little sandpaper on the knuckle. It's very unpleasant. In fact, a lot of people who've had kidney stones and gone through childbirth will say the kidney stones are worse. But so I got up and I just thought it was, hey man, something's going on with my back. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, I run a hot bath and I get in to try to, because I don't have a heating pad with me in Florida. So I get in and try and soak my back and see if like the muscles were seized up or something. And after about a half an hour in the tub, I'm like, this is not getting any better. So I get out and I kind of struggle through the morning, and the boys wake up and I tell them, you know what? I don't know what's going on. I feel terrible. You guys go ahead to the parks. Like I'm like not well here. And no sooner did they get to the parks, I called them like, I got to go to like one of these urgent care facilities or something. Like I said, something's wrong. So we drove. They came back and picked me up. Took me to. I think I called the front desk. Or Rob called the front desk and asked, like, where should we go? And the Disney front desk recommended that we go to, like, Centricare, which is an urgent care right off property. So I had never been to an urgent care before. We pull in, and I must have sat there for an hour and a half before someone finally came in to see me. And the guy comes in, and he, like, I tell him what's going on, and he presses, oh, is it here? So, okay, well, you have a kidney stone. There's nothing we can do for you here. Like, if it's really bad, you should go to, like Orlando Hospital or whatever, whatever the nearest hospital is. And we left the urgent care. I said, drive me to a Walgreens, like the closest drugstore. And at the time, my doctor was also the work comp doctor for our company. And I'm the HR director, so I would refer people to him all the time. So I had his pager number. So I paged him, because back then that's what you did. I paged him. And he called me back like 5 minutes later, and I'm telling him what's going on. And he's like, well, as long as you're still able to use the bathroom, that means things are flowing down there, you're fine. But if you get to a point where you can't, then you got to get to a hospital. He's like, otherwise you just kind of wait to pass it and drink a lot of cranberry juice and drink a ton of water. And, oh, okay. And I said, well, we're getting on a Disney cruise tomorrow. Like, he goes, I got to tell you what. He's like, if I were you, I wouldn't get on that ship, if you haven't passed that kidney stone. I drank about 3 gallons of cranberry juice, but I got on the ship, and I made it. I survived. At some point, people talk about passing a kidney stone is like,
yeah.
There's a great Seinfeld episode where Kramer finally passes one.
Friends episode, right?
I did not have that experience. Like mine just went away, and so I have had them since. I get them every so often. But that first one, I will always remember at 4:00 in the morning at Disney World. Have any of you had any experiences like that?
I want to ask a follow-up question. By any chance,
yes.
Did you ride Big Thunder Mountain that day?
I'm sure.
I'm sure. And the reason I ask is because there was a semi-scientific study done by, I believe, a doctor who discovered that something about the way that Big Thunder Mountain is laid out is that it actually breaks up kidney stones. I am not lying. This is a doctor published some study about this, like, 3, 4, 5 years ago, maybe, after his own experience of riding Big Thunder Mountain and having it break up his kidney stone.
I would think if that's the case, then the best one to ride would be Rock and Roller Coaster, because that just beats the heck out of you.
It is here. I found it. If you just start typing in Big Thunder Mountain kidney stone, it's on the New York Times. A roller coaster remedy for kidney stones. This was in 2016, and the authors found that moderate intensity rattling coasters might be effective at dislodging little kidney stones in the outer ducts of the kidney and propelling towards the ureter, the tube connecting the kidneys to the bladder. Let's see. Most notable, one patient passed kidney stones after each of 3 consecutive rides at the Big Thunder Mountain roller coaster at Disney World in Florida. He teamed with a urologist to create a 3D printed silicone cast of a patient's kidney. The researchers filled their life-size model with kidney stones and urine and headed to Walt Disney World.
They took a model on the ride.
Holding their model at kidney height, the doctors took 20
this is a
rides
Hal Bowers thing.
with 3 stones in the model at a time. They saw kidney stones move from the periphery of their kidney model towards the top of the ureter in many cases. Success rates were higher in the back of the roller coaster than the front, 64 versus 17, probably because of
if you ride this ride once or twice a year, you'll be good.
You
keep you jiggled out.
Exactly.
Just,
or it jiggles them loose.
Right. And then you gotta pass one. So
true.
Maybe it caused it. You never know.
Well, I
used to end up in the hospital a few times as a kid with colds and stomach aches and things like that. I remember being in agony, on trips and ended up in urgent care, things like that.
Yeah.
A few times, not every trip, but a few times.
I have 2 experiences. One, I went to Typhoon Lagoon, and then the next day I woke up with a massive case of pink eye, and it was just like I couldn't even. By the end of the day, I'm like my eyes were just like swollen shut. Had to go to the quick med place. They were great. Gave me eye drops. I was fine the next day. However, we were down there in 2010, 2011, I think, and my son were listening. It was during Food and Wine, and Smash Mouth was playing. And I don't know if you know, at the American Garden Theater, there's some chains that are spread between 2 posts. And he was leaning, kind of butt sitting on the chain, if you will, and kind of swinging back.
Not supposed to do that.
No, he's not supposed to, because this is what happens. He fell off and whacked his head on the curb. I'm like, all right, he got up. He was all right.
Bloodbath.
Crying. No broken skin.
He just started speaking Portuguese.
Wakes up at 2 a.m. vomiting, right? So we think concussion. We go over to the Celebration Hospital. He has a CAT scan, which is shaped, by the way, like a giant sandcastle.
Like a cat.
It isn't. No, it's not like a cat, but it's a sandcastle.
You can say it's a mouse.
Super, super nice. Great facility. They cleared him. They said, just take it easy the rest of your trip. And, we didn't really put him on any crazy rides after that. But that was our...
no Big Thunder.
No Big Thunder after that. So that was our medical event. So.
That's funny because I have one too, because I went over with my wife, and this was before my youngest was born, so I had two boys with me, and we stayed the night over at one of the Buena Vista hotels, I think the Travel Lodge, and we were going to go to the Mickey's Halloween party, and we were getting dressed, and my son, I think he was 2, fell forward off of the bed onto the ground and cut his eye open, and so we had to go to urgent care. And there was just blood blood on his costume, blood on our costumes. Went to the urgent care, got him patched up, and then went to the Halloween event and had a grand time for the rest of the evening.
He was totally in costuem. Like, oh, look,
the
kid's got stitches. Let him in.
They did the creed on The Office. Hey, today's Halloween. That is really, really good timing. Blood all over
covered in blood. Had any of you ever have an experience with Disney's legendary customer service? And the experience I remember, I don't remember if I've ever told this story, but walking in, Rob and some of my friends on one of our trips, walking in Hollywood Studios, MGM at the time, and I'm walking down Sunset now, and somewhere we weren't in the park 5 minutes, and trying to get to the first ride, probably Tower or Rock and Roller Coaster, because what you did is you ran and got a fast pass for the one and went on the other while you waited for the fast pass to come as soon as the park opened. We're running to do that, and the glasses I was wearing, they just fell apart. Like the frame was held together by a screw. The screw came out. It popped open. My lenses fall down on the ground. Like,
what a
so
scene.
I'm standing there. Yeah, it's like a Jerry Lewis movie, and I'm standing there with this. I pick it up, and they're looking at me, and I would handle it better now probably, but I didn't handle that stuff well back then.
Go on without me.
I did not. No. I'm looking at no. If I have to go, everybody has to go. So we walk. What do we do? And we're at Disney World. Let's just go to guest services and tell them what happened. They'll fix it. I literally said, they'll fix it. So we went to guest services. I told them what happened. We're standing there with we didn't have the screw. The screw had disappeared, but I had the lenses and the frames. And 5 minutes later, maintenance guy comes out. Give me a minute. Pulls out his little toolkit, sits there, spent 5 minutes putting my glasses back together with a tiny little screw and a nut. And 10 minutes later, we were on our way to
awesome.
Just imagine that. Just because I was I know they'll try to help me if I go up and ask them, and they did.
Yeah.
I don't know if I guess they would try today, but I just, that was their reputation, and I just remember it saving the day.
It's funny working in a profession where I work with customer service a lot and technical support and professional services. Making client delight is a huge thing, and that's a great example of delighting your clients and making sure that they're going to come back and that they have a great experience. That's really, really hard to do. It's hard to teach and hard to get all of your individuals to be able to acknowledge the challenge, acknowledge the problem, and come to a solution that is beneficial for them as well, and more importantly, the guest. And that's kind of shows why Disney has classes on this too, for professionals and corporate level stuff, to demonstrate that the easiest solution is not always the answer. The easiest solution is, let me call somebody who the glasses place. They'll probably take you, lenses in about an hour. And by the way, you're going to have to get a taxi and you're going to miss your whole day.
Right.
Trying that extra little thing, because they got small screws. They've got things they have to fix.
We got a guy here,
Yeah.
Jim's handy. We'll just call him out. He's got a tool belt.
So realizing the tools that are at your disposal and being able to utilize them in the right moment is a talent that you have to teach your people, and those are behaviors that they need to exhibit when they're working with guests, in order to help fulfill whatever need they come up with. So that's a really great one. The one I have is kind of a cute little story. When my son was very little, he had a lot of sensory overload problems and challenges where he would put his hands on his ears and he couldn't stand lots of noise. If we went on Pirates, he would close his ears. He would put his hands on his ears because he thought that would close his mind to what he was seeing. Or
listen up, kid, I'm paying $75 a day for this.
Pirates. You're getting on Pirates. So a lot of loud noises, a lot of sensory, a lot of different things. And we explained it to somebody and they said, oh, we were going to see Mickey. And they said, hold on. And they took care of us. They just brought him in, and it was this private session with just Mickey, quiet. And it was absolutely one of the most amazing experiences we ever had. And they acknowledged it and knew what we were dealing with. And, he's older now. He's since grown out of those types of things and been able to self-manage, which is great. But it was just so comforting to see somebody be able to acknowledge that and bring that special little treatment out, which was, it really went above and beyond.
That's just nice. I hope it's still like that.
I'm hopeful that the result of the pandemic actually drives a little more what we saw years ago, because it's forced Disney to weed themselves down to a different staffing level that they had previously been before. Now, that can go two ways. It can be, hey, we don't have a lot of people, it's going to be really tough. Or they can extend the olive branch out and make it really, really exceptional again. So it'll be interesting to see what direction it goes.
I have a nephew who has issues, and as a younger tourist, I mean, Disney was the only place my sister could take him. Because he has issues with, he's autistic and certain issues with the lines and the attractions, and anywhere else that you would take him generally is not able to accommodate those needs. And I think that's one of the things that really sets Disney apart, is that there are so many people with various disabilities who flock to there because they go out of their way to accommodate those disabilities. And we encounter them when we're in the parks. Mm-hmm. And, just, you would never see them at a different theme park, or amusement park or things like that. So, it's a special place, and it has created great relationships. And obviously the relationship we have, which is a result of the parks, is one of them.
Right. Yeah. Brian, you bring up a really good point. I guess my question to you gentlemen is, when you're young, you go to the parks because you want to go on rides and you want to do fun and do different things you've never done before, right? And it's all about the rides. And Brian, I think you were the first person that I identified with that saw their life moving on, changing, but adapting to the friendships that you had, as you mentioned earlier, the 30-some friends that you have down there, the 4 of us here, and everybody that helps us. So how has the park visits changed for you from the very first time to now? I'm sure there's still, for me, there's still magical moments and things I always want to do no matter what. I got to ride Pirates. I got to ride Thunder. That's just my thing. But as an adult, you start to see, at least for me, I start to see the fun in other things, going to restaurants and experiencing things and shopping, or doing some of those off-beaten paths, or just relaxing and watching the water go by at Fort Wilderness or something.
Yeah, how about sitting on a bench?
Absolutely. Like Walt.
It's something, it's something I never would have done in my early trips. When I was doing the commando thing and we were trying to get, as many rides in as we could in the day or ride the new stuff. And I like the thought of, let me spend 20 minutes here enjoying a Diet Coke and a pretzel.
Yep.
While I just watch people enjoying themselves. Like, that's a great part of a trip now. And it's just something I never would have done before.
Yeah, I know I have a couple of different use cases for the park. I mean, there are the times when I go over just with my wife, and we have spent, a decent amount of time just using the resorts and the bars and the restaurants, and on a nice on those few nice Florida evenings between like November and February, being able to walk around Food and Wine and enjoy tasting stuff, or taking a simple Skyliner trip, hanging out at the Polynesian and getting something outside on the patio at Trader Sam's. It's like, those are really nice experiences when the weather is pleasant. It's very nice just to be out at the resorts or in the parks and just enjoy the environment, because they spent also a boatload of money on creating these beautiful outdoor spaces as well. So it's nice to be able to slow down and just enjoy the resorts or some of the outdoor spaces as well. And then when we're with our kids, it's a little bit of a different experience. They're not as hardcore as I used to be. That they need breaks between rides and things, so we intersperse activities with rides, and we get to enjoy the park in different ways there too. They've added more playgrounds and more open play type areas as time has gone on, and I think as their market has started to has obviously gotten younger. People didn't bring a lot of babies and 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds to the parks in the 70s and the 80s. If there were kids, they were always usually 4, 5, 6 and able to walk. There are strollers everywhere now, and some of the offerings have changed because of that. So it's been nice to see them also kind of stay with the times. And to me, it was the weirdest thing in the world that they stick a playground at Epcot outside of Imagination every year doing Food and Wine. But my son, when he was like 4 or 5, had a blast on it. And that was great. That was perfect for him. So really
and I think that, it's one of the critiques as they started dropping spinner rides in a lot of dead spaces in Animal Kingdom and at the Magic Kingdom, adding the flying carpets. And traditionalists who enjoyed the open area and adventure, just talk about what an abomination it was. And certainly, we love from the old films and photos those views in Adventureland. But for kids, they just think it's the greatest thing in the world to hop on the flying carpets and fly around there. And on one of those trips with my nephew, I remember riding the magic carpets for the first time saying, this is actually pretty fun up here. Because I can see both sides of it. The critique side of, you're taking space formerly made for the movement of people and to create an atmosphere and ruining it. But on the flip side, there's a whole, I always try to, there's a segment of Disney fans who hate the Autopia, but it is consistently rated as like the favorite ride of kids like 12 and under because they get to drive a car. And, I try to remind myself as they make the changes they're making now, that the parks aren't built for me. I'm a 47-year-old guy who doesn't go with his family. There are things I love to do there, but, it's made for the things they're putting in the parks today are made for the demographic of families going today and families that are younger than me and that are attracted by different things. And I try to keep in mind that that's okay, because what it does is it creates a mountain of content for us to continue doing shows about things that aren't there anymore because they keep taking stuff out.
As I watch a lot of the old films too, I was watching a number of them tonight, previewing them before we get them transferred. And I think we forget that it was a different time. It was a different way of visiting a park back then too. It has become a destination right now, right? It has become a save up and let's go. And I'm speaking.
It's a rite of childhood passage, right? Like it's
absolutely. And what I want to add is that the four of us and many of the people that we're speaking to are the exception to that. They're the exception of the rite of passage. They're exception to the people that don't go. We are the ones that enjoy it. We are the ones that analyze it. We are the ones that memorize it and remember it. To a point of preserve it. Yes, thank you, JT. That's right. That's our number one thing. To a point of almost ad nauseum at times too, right? So I think our take is different on it, and we do have to step a little back and say, okay, the park itself was different back then. It had a different meaning. It had a different clientele, and that's completely changed over the years, and that's okay, right? And look, we're not going to be able to go back and do what was there
right. I mean, we know from doing the show and the impressions we get that there are 70s Disney fans that we hear from that think that was the best era. There are people that think the 80s were where it was at. You know, when there's a huge number of 90s Disney fans who, you know, when they were destroying a lot of the stuff from the 70s and 80s and updating it for the 90s, that loved all the stuff they were doing in the 90s. So, like, and there will be generations after us that, you know, think the big stupid hat in front of the Hollywood Theater was the best era of Hollywood Boulevard. And, you know, we'll all still judge those people. But, you know, it's just, there's that's part of growing older, right?
Yep. And there's going to be things that you're attached to, just like everything else in life that, you know, you're attached to them, and you're going to have challenges with the new stuff. That's normal.
Yeah, that's the whole growth thing, right? It's like anytime anybody introduces something new, your first reaction is like, I don't like that. It's different. I don't like it. And then that's what you rally with. And then as you stop and process it and take it in, it's like, and start to become more comfortable with it. And then finally, maybe you grieve for the thing that's gone. It's like, you go through all the steps, you know, of what is it? The 7 steps of grief.
That's why Disney and other companies also teach how to accept change. Change is good. Change, you need to move forward. I think one of the challenges of the community that we talk to, and I'm sorry if I'm going to offend anybody, but change has to happen. The parks have to change. They have to adapt. We cannot go back. We cannot rebuild. We cannot bring back. That's just not going to happen. And, you know, we have to also admit, too, that Disney has a business. They're not here for the small clientele that we're speaking to. They're not here for the Twitter folks. They are here to make money. They are here to make their shareholders profitable and make the company move forward. So you may not like the new fireworks show. You may not like the next ride. But that next fireworks show and that new ride is going to be what people who are young now are talking about 50 years from now. And that's going to be what they remember and what they're keying off of right now.
What are we going to be talking about 50 years from now, Todd?
If I'm here 50 years from now, I hope I'm still talking.
We're going to be talking about the applesauce in the home.
Did you get the whiter straw this week? Because I got the taro one and I couldn't get the sauce through. Gentlemen, before we close out, I have another one here. I have a really fun recollection of the excitement of television specials. We've talked about them here.
Yeah.
Brian, I've used your explanation of why some of these TV specials were so important, because it was not just a travelogue, as we've talked about. It was also a way for you to see the famous stars that you knew from television shows outside of their normal roles or tours, where if they were musical guests or something like that. And in the 80s and in the 70s too. Well, 70s were bizarre. We know we've talked about how bizarre the television special. But in the 80s, you had the Easter special. You had the Christmas parade. A lot of them were done live. You had Regis. You had Kathy Lee. You had all these different stars that were down there. We know they were done for one reason. That's commercialism, right? They wanted to bring you down there to enjoy. But for me, they left a lasting impression of what some of those, important days in your life and in the year really meant. I remember my grandparents calling us up and saying, oh, there's a special on right now about Walt Disney World, or them turning it on, after we unwrap the gifts, the Disney World parade is on, and turning it on. And, this is the segment of people that we're talking to right now that is post 16 millimeter films at Kiwanis and Lions clubs and all that stuff, right? This was the next best thing before the internet. We all grew up with it. Although I don't know how. Did you ever go to a Lions club or a Rotary club to watch a 16 millimeter film?
Actually, I remember
See, he did.
I remember my dad, I think he worked for the Bell System, and I believe he checked out a 16 millimeter film, like a stop motion holiday thing that I think our church group watched. So I am familiar with the concept. Yes,
yeah. And I remember getting 16 millimeter films delivered to your classroom, and you're like, oh my God, it's the day off, right?
So exciting. The days you'd walk in and the film machine was set
wasn't
up.
it that between film strip?
Also known as a projector.
Yes.
I don't know why I just said film machine.
Yeah, where'd you come from?
I don't know.
But anyway, I don't know what you guys... JT, you were nodding when I said Grandma and Grandpa called you up and said there was a television special on. You were nodding. So they were pinnacle for me growing up. And the biggest one I remember was the MGM opening. For some reason that resonated. The dancers in white swinging back and forth. They used that clip ad nauseum for years and years. I remember that one really, really well, and I remember a number of the Christmas parades.
Yeah, it was always Christmas for us. We'd get the call. I remember from my aunt a few times here and there.
So you get the remote call. You got to put on ABC. Yeah.
Yes, and you wouldn't be thinking that at all on Christmas Day. Like TV wasn't a priority at all, and then you'd flip it on, and that kind of was on in the background. The other one I remember was we'd get the Disney Channel in the winter. My parents would always make sure to shut it off in the summer, so we weren't sitting there watching TV. And I remember back then it was like, well, you got to pay to activate it. You got to have it, and then there's also the free previews.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. The activation fees. Yes. I forgot about those.
And my mom was like, well, wait until it's a free activation. Then we're getting it. I remember that. But I don't remember the guy's name, but he always would do the stuff around Disney World. He had the glasses. He was an actor, comedian type guy. And he did one that sticks out in my mind in particular was what's the fastest ride at Disney World? And he did like Water Sprite, Space Mountain, a few others, and then it turns out the monorail was the fastest ride at Disney World. And, he went, it was always something at Disney World, like, the hats of Disney World or those sorts of things. But those were some of the specials I remember that were just quick little bumpers, but still they were out there.
All right. Well, gentlemen, we need to kind of wrap this up. I mean, honestly, I could sit here for another 3 hours and talk with you about this because there's so much to capture about what has made Walt Disney World what it is today to all of us. So let's go around the horn here, and JT, I'll let you start. And then I know Brian and Hal have something, and I'd like to close it out. So, JT, go ahead.
I'll just say I think this has been a new chapter of my Disney World life. Seeing this through with you guys and doing all this stuff. I had two things I wanted to touch on. One of the bigger ones and one of the more unknowns was that first event we had where we were scrambling to get pontoon boats and hoping they'd rent them to us, and some random schlub wouldn't show up and rent 3 of them before us. That was kind of a big deal. And one of the highlights, I think one of the most fun things we've done, and which we talked about on an episode, is and it really wouldn't have happened without our event and meeting you guys, was when we walked Spaceship Earth after hours. That was one of my, I want to say top 3-4 of the things I've ever done at Disney World, where I've just that is burned into my brain as something that was a surprise. It was neater than I expected, and even doing it was even cooler. And then on top of it, now every time I walk by that big geodesic sphere, I'm like, I feel like I conquered that thing, and none of you were in here. Everybody I look at, I'm like, nobody else did this. At least that the odds are pretty good that we're one of the few people that have actually walked that after hours. So, but it's been a lot of fun, and this is a very fun episode. So, definitely.
Yeah, I could certainly do it. Like I said, I could talk about this for hours. Mm-hmm. So, and that was an amazing night. The fact that we were all able to do that together and it just fortified kind of our knowledge of not only that attraction but other things we learned that night, which was great.
All right, well, I'll go. Because I spent some time crafting this one. Hopefully, it's not done.
This is your Oscar award.
Yeah, here we go.
Here we go.
Here it is.
All right, so. And really, this is to me about what is the specialness of going to Walt Disney World. I by no means had a miserable childhood. I had a wonderful family that loved me greatly, and I had lots of toys and things to play with. But in the culture of the 1970s, especially in the early 1970s, there was a real lack of fantastical, imaginative stuff in pop culture. Daily life really, for the most part, was mundane. Guys were expected to be into watching football on TV and collecting baseball cards. The only real programming for kids, was on Saturday mornings. And there were a lot of fun shows, but there were only a very few, that were made for kids with curious minds. Our yearly trips to Walt Disney World, we started going, we went the year before it opened and got to take a bus trip, but we went every year from 1973 until we finally moved to Orlando in 1979. And those trips are one of the few things I genuinely looked forward to as a kid. The excitement was palpable. I mean, from the moment that you hit the Disney property line and the quality of the pavement on the highway changed, because it literally did. There was like a line and suddenly the pavement got lighter instead.
Somebody put money into this.
Yeah. And from the backseat of the station wagon, you'd marvel as you would pass palm trees and white sand in the medians. Like, that didn't exist anywhere else. I mean, clearly you had gone to some place that was different from the normal world. I mean, the anticipation of getting there was terrific. And that feeling of being someplace special and different kept just compounding. I mean, you got to ride a monorail, which looked like something out of a science fiction movie. You sat in a big room with birds and flowers and strange tiki figures around you, with a view out of a window of an island with a volcano and clouds going by. And slowly that room came to life as the show progressed and built to a climax where everything around you was moving and the volcano was erupting and it was raining outside the windows. I mean, that was so different from back then. Bears playing guitar and singing with stuffed heads mounted on the wall like you saw at your uncle's basement, coming to life and making jokes and encouraging you to buy Pepsi. I mean, this would all be commonplace by the 1980s as Chuck E. Cheese's popped up all around suburbia. But in 1971, this was really a fantastical experience. I mean, there is nothing like this available to us. You could board a moving couch and be transported to Mexico, New Orleans, and Dunn's River Falls, or through the inside of a stone Gothic mansion where ghosts were equally happy to party and pop out behind gravestones and scare the poop out of you. Until finally one of them sat next to you before following you home. I mean, this place was just different. Cars would careen out of control through a city town square, crashing through a railroad tunnel, sending you to a meeting with the devil. Witches menaced you with poisoned apples before dropping an enormous jewel on your head. Pirate ships flew over London and past the moon to a place where mermaids and Native Americans improbably lived together with a crew of pirates. A band made up of both familiar and unfamiliar Disney characters sweetly serenaded you until three crazy birds on a flying carpet swooped in with guns blazing and stole the show. I mean, this place was just nuts. A sea captain would take you on a voyage of a depth of 80 fathoms to the lost city of Atlantis, where sea serpents and mermaids guarded golden treasures and giant squids crushed less fortunate submarines crews as if they were eggshells. Walt Disney World was something so vastly different and unique compared to the rest of the world then. Eventually, we were propelled by electromagnets through a Brazilian-inspired city of the future. We were secured by a shoulder strap and thrown around until we were bruised in a tin can rocket while chocolate chip cookies flew through the stars overhead. Before seeing a future world populated by big screen TVs, video calls with the boss, surveillance cameras watching over the front doors, and little sisters in cribs. A future we would actually end up living in 40 years later. But we had no way to know that then. We rode in boats past ancient temples and pools of deadly hippos, on double-decker buses down the main street of a type of town that our grandparents told us they grew up in, but all we saw was a rundown part of town. On keelboats and steamships, past plastic deer and dogs perpetually watching fish jump in alligator swamp, and getting the green light to go along while driving little tiny cars at less than breakneck speeds on a 4-lane track. And we got the team membership card from Goodyear to prove it. You could hear all kinds of music, from steel pan to fife and drum to banjo to another watered down rock and roll version of Joy to the World. Yeah, for one day out of the year, you could be whatever it was that you wanted to be. An explorer, a pirate, an astronaut, a cowboy, or all of them. You could try new things or stick with the thing that you marked down in your guidebook the last time that you went that you liked. As long as you had a ticket book, a ticket left in your ticket book. That's what made Walt Disney World special to me. It was a place where I got to go for a day each year and experience things I could never experience in my hometown. It opened my mind to new worlds, new possibilities, new cultures, and our nation's history. And as I grew older, I only appreciated these lessons more and more, along with the warm feeling of spending leisurely but fun-filled days with my family. We laughed, we smiled, we got yelled at, and no matter how hot, crowded, aggravating, or tiring the park was, when we walked past the twinkling fairy lights in the trees of the hub, while When You Wish Upon a Star played out of hidden speakers in the bushes, it was the best day ever.
Even says so on the shirts people wear now.
And that was originally cut down from a glorious finale of 3 hours by Hal Bauer, so he did some fine editing there.
I feel a little bit like I have to follow Michael Jackson.
I know, this
at
is
the
hard.
Motown 25th anniversary
Yeah,
thing. Like he just performed Billie Jean and did the moonwalk for the first time, and now I have to come in here. I want to talk about our experience a bit as we finish up here. Somebody asked me a question sometime in the last year and a half. One of our listeners, maybe we were on a podcast, or I was on a podcast somewhere, and they said, if you could do anything at Disney World, that you haven't been able to do, what would it be? And I was kind of stumped, because in 1 minute, I was running through the last, for us, 7 years now, and I mean, we have had so many experiences. I certainly have. And not just, renting our own boat and Discovery River Cruise, getting our own captain to squire us as close to river country as we wanted to get, walking Spaceship Earth, the track with the lights on and a guide pointing things out to us. Every corporate lounge on property that you could be in, I've been in the last X number of years. We had lunch at Club 33 in Disneyland. We've personally sat with the last two Imagineers who ever worked with Walt, and had personal time with them. And just around the parks, the only answer I could come up with is I'd like to see the Castle Suite, which is something that wasn't built until 2007 or whatever it was when they finally built that. It didn't exist for 40 years. But the experiences we have had as a result, so many of those experiences I'm talking about, as a result of people we've met through just for me, being up in the DVC lounge over Imagination. People who I've met as listeners, as fans of this show, who have become my friends, are the people that took me up there and said, oh, hey, come on up. And it's not a place I could have gone before. So many of those things. Going backstage at Epcot when we did our event and being driven around the whole back of World Showcase, which is nothing for someone who was an employee there, who got to be a cast member for a period of time. But for us, I was never back there. So that was such a cool experience. And so I think of all of those things, on a Disney World level, that experiences we got to have from people who sit and listen to us talk every month, and the work that we do on the website and those types of things, that has really been a treasure. Certainly I have made some amazing friends, not just the three of you, but you are my brothers, and we talk to each other offline all the time about what's going on in our lives, and when we're going through tough times and when we're going through happy times. And that's been amazing, because it seems like every decade in your life, you probably have different people who are there, and we're right in the prime of our period of life together. And so that's been great, especially during the pandemic, since we're remote. We're remote all the time anyway, so our relationship has been unchanged. We still get to communicate every day the same way we always do, without really noticing a difference. But to me, that's really, the original idea of the parks was to, as I said at the outset, was to bring people together, and it's still serving that function today for me. Great experiences, things I remember, people I love. So what more could you ask for? Yep. And all the stuff Hal said.
Just ditto that. Absolutely. To reiterate really quickly why we're all here today and how much it means to me is that I mentioned 1980 where I got my first trip, and the pinnacle experience of Walt Disney World for me was 1986. I could still remember what it meant, the music, taking the record home, going to the Centaurium, feeling that it was different than just the Magic Kingdom. And that instilled in me some sort of spirit that I cannot put a finger on to this day what it is or how it, but I can just tell you it's affected me I know that I've succeeded when I edit some of the videos for our events if I can continually get myself teared up or choked up or like psyched up, because that's how I felt back in 1986 when I visited Epcot. That's the feeling that people want to feel when they go to Walt Disney World, or when they feel the music, when they feel the beat, or whatever is there. What's really interesting is that trip instilled me to write a book about Walt Disney World. We'll talk about that some other time. You wrote a travel guide. I did. And that begot a website, which gets us to almost...
What's a book?
So it's this thing with ask the Phoenicians. They can help you out.
His middle name is Birnbaum.
Birnbaum, that's right. And that started DisneyCorner.com and all this stuff, and discovering my grandparents and parents had filmed from their visits led me to look at this from, wow, okay, this is a little bit of a lineage here, right? My grandparents went first, then my parents went, then they took me, and we started going. And, that's the short story of how we got to this website. I think the really important thing here is for the four of us is that ourselves and the listeners have come to identify something in our lives that brings us great joy, brings us camaraderie, brings us friendships and enjoyment that we may not find elsewhere. For me, you don't have your best friends all the time enjoying the same things you do, or your coworkers. But to be able to find a group of friends and a group of people, especially the four of you, as Brian said, the brotherhood that we formed here, and the common thread that we share in the interest and the experiences that we've been through, the sharing that we've done about what we've been able to see at Walt Disney World, what we've been able to experience on our own together and continue to share. And the fact that the excitement doesn't die in any of us about it. We're still willing to tell the same stories, to talk about the same things, pontificate on what we believe, and continue to bring the excitement of what was to our listener base continues to drive me, and I hope it continues to drive the three of you, and I believe it does, because we wouldn't be here today. We've been doing this now for 71 episodes. It's amazing. 2015 we started, gentlemen. So we've been doing this for 7 years. I never, in my wildest dreams, would have expected to be sitting here in 2021 with a giant list of things to talk about. I never would have thought, thanks to Brian, to go talk about menus and food, or Hal's in-depth knowledge of the most obscure things that we can go down and research. JT, your different knowledge of different things and looking at things from a different viewpoint and researching things that we wouldn't think to research. And I just never would have thought we would have made this much effect in the community, with ourselves, and with what we're producing. So a hearty felt thank you to the three of you. Thank you to Walt Disney World, Roy Disney, Walt Disney, all of you that have created that magical place that we love and endear in our hearts. And here's to the three of you and to the next 50 years. And I guess with that, Brian, take us out.
Follow the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society on Twitter and Instagram at LBV History, and on the web at lbvhistory.org. For all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at RetroWDW.com, and on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at RetroWDW. And follow our hosts, Todd McCartney, on Twitter at WDWMS, Hal Bowers on Twitter and Instagram at GoAwayGreen, JT Cougar on Twitter at LS1JT, and on YouTube at Rubber City Motoring, and on the web at rubbercitymotoring.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Brian P. Miles. Retro Disney World is the monthly podcast of the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society, a nonpartisan, nonprofit, tax-exempt 501c3 organization, and is not affiliated in any way with the Walt Disney Corporation or any of its subsidiary or affiliated entities.